She thought she was just his wife on paper, until she built the case that took down his enemy. Emma had spent 7 months pretending she was outside James Hawke's world. But when Victor Crane came for them, she stopped standing at the edge of her own life. In one night, she used old legal instincts, public records, and a mind sharper than any weapon in James' empire to build a prosecution no one else had seen. By 11:15 p.m., Victor Crane was in federal custody, and James finally understood his wife was not a weakness. She was his most dangerous advantage. Let us break down exactly how this insane scene kicks off, drenched in the worst kind of cheap arrogance. Listen to Ryan Calloway throwing his voice across this dead, quiet art gallery. This guy is your textbook low-level narcissist, wrapping his calculated cruelty in fake pity. But look closely at Emma Miller. She does not even flinch. You and I are going to unpack this disaster together, because the plot twist hiding here is absolutely wild. She lets this clown keep his illusion of control, fully knowing she already traded one basic monster for a literal final boss. Her secret husband, James Hawke, is a straight-up apex predator. Stick with me through this, because honestly, sometimes the devil you know is absolute child's play, compared to the terrifying demon you actually marry. The exact second Ryan decides to publicly humiliate the woman he once broke, this absolute fool unknowingly signs his own death warrant. The lighting in this fancy gallery frames Emma in total, suffocating isolation. She showed up solo, rocking a dark red dress that just swallows the glow of the room. This is not some desperate cry for attention. It is a brutal exercise in just trying to exist in a space where she cannot hide anymore. She stands near the cold edge of the room, grounding her racing thoughts against the icy glass of a champagne flute. The mask holds up flawlessly, right until the harsh sound of her toxic ex shatters her peace. Look, we all wear masks to survive the day, but the absolute heaviest ones are always the ones we force ourselves to wear. 2 simple words just hang completely frozen in the air. Emma Miller. Notice how the camera pushes in just as her spine goes totally rigid, locking into a posture of pure defense. She pulls off a slow, painfully deliberate turn. Barely 12 feet away stands Ryan, wearing a smirk so incredibly predatory, it literally turns your stomach. It is the exact look she once tragically confused with love, now exposed as the empty tool of a complete parasite. When she finally speaks his name, her voice is completely dead. He closes the distance with the insane arrogance of a man who has never faced a single consequence in his entire life. He looks her up and down like a discarded toy. Seriously, people who treat you as an object will simply never recognize your actual humanity. He tells her she looks different, chasing those toxic words with a laugh perfectly engineered to throw her off balance. He stops right at the edge of her personal space. It is a calculated invasion, designed to suffocate her while he plays the nice guy. He starts digging into her life, asking about her vanished career with this infuriating nod of a dude who is only pretending to listen. When he presses for details, she gives him absolutely zero leverage. Handing the terrifying truth of her new life to a clown like Ryan would be a fatal mistake. He is blind to the fact that she had to forge herself into cold steel just to survive his abuse. It is a harsh truth, but we often have to harden ourselves into absolute iron just to protect what little peace we have managed to find. Stick with me here, because this is where the mind games reach a boiling point. Watch Emma analyze his face, tracking the exact same abusive math he always used to tear her down. He is weighing her quiet elegance against his pathetic fantasy of her total ruin. He points out she is alone, wrapping his surgical cruelty in a sick mask of casual concern. Then comes that slight, dismissing shrug. It is a masterclass in passive aggression, meant to crush her spirit without leaving a bruise. He uses their time apart like a literal knife, hinting her loneliness is a fatal flaw. He cannot even fathom that her isolation is actually the heavy price of a profound rebirth. True growth almost always requires us to stand completely alone in the dark before we can finally walk forward. He lets a heavy silence pass before dropping a smirking comment, that she should have found a replacement by now. The glass in Emma's grip turns into absolute ice as the edges of her vision blur into darkness. Her entire universe shrinks down to the agonizing 6 inches, separating her from the man who promised her forever, right before destroying her life. Ryan drops his voice into a fake, intimate whisper, weaponizing her own trauma against her. He claims he worries about her walls being way too high. Emma just stares back, her body unnervingly still. That kind of stillness is never peace. It is the breathless terror of a hunted creature hoping the shadows hide it. Trauma does not just magically fade away. It simply learns to hold its breath when the predator walks back into the room. Burying every emotion is a brutal but necessary armor when your mind has already survived a total collapse. She flips the script and asks about his new partner, dropping the question with the freezing precision of a scalpel. The smug look on Ryan's face instantly dims as his fake smile derails. He spits out a defensive syllable, claiming everything is fine. But Emma catches the microscopic twitch in his jaw. It is a tiny fracture in his perfect armor. Armed with that pathetic truth, she steps back to make a clean escape. But his voice hooks her one last time. He breathes her name with a soft, desperate inflection that pulls at old wounds. The absolute art of healing is forgiving yourself for still hearing the ghost of the person who broke you. He shatters her boundary line again, invading her space until the scent of his cologne fills her lungs. It is the exact stuff she bought him in another lifetime, lingering like a cruel ghost. He tries to rewrite their ugly history, whispering she deserved a softer landing when they fell apart. He puts on a mask of empathy, pretending to wish her well. But as Emma looks at him now, the blinding lights of her old affection are finally switched off. She sees him with perfect clarity. He is nothing but a fragile, predictable man, starving for a reaction. You and I might be wondering the exact same thing here. How do we give so much power to someone so incredibly small? The real tragedy of moving on is realizing the monster who ruined your life is just an ordinary, deeply broken person. She lets the hammer drop, letting the truth slip from her lips in a quiet breath. I am married. The suffocating silence that crashes down between them is a cinematic masterpiece. Ryan's face becomes a literal battleground. You can watch him cycle from shock to desperate denial before settling into raw agony. She watches that pathetic flicker of pain and buries it in the coldest vault of her heart. He chokes on his words, demanding to know when it happened. 7 months ago, she whispers. He scrambles for footing, eyes darting around to see if this unseen husband is in the room. But before Emma can answer, the air in the gallery grows unbearably heavy. Sometimes a single devastating truth has the power to pull all the oxygen out of a room. A true apex predator never needs to announce their arrival. The second James Hawk crosses that threshold, the collective pulse of the gallery violently staggers. The buzz of conversation completely fractures and dies. It is a primal instinct to hold your breath when a terrifying shadow falls over your throat. Emma feels this chilling shift long before she even turns her head. James stands framed in the doorway, wearing a flawless dark suit, his eyes looking like sheets of freezing winter water. He does not just enter a space, he completely consumes it. He moves forward with the terrifying, unhurried grace of a gathering hurricane. True power never has to raise its voice. It simply walks into the room and waits for everyone else to fall completely silent. The 2 absolute units flanking him look carved out of solid concrete. They move with lethal precision to isolate the perimeter, operating on a violent frequency these snobs cannot comprehend. It takes James exactly 4 seconds to find his wife. His dead, oceanic gaze locks onto Emma, flicks over to evaluate the pathetic shape of Ryan, and snaps back to her. It is a terrifying download of pure information in a single glance. Over months of terrifying captivity, Emma learned that his briefest look carries the deadly weight of a loaded gun. A deep vibration against her palm confirms he's always watching her. We often trade one form of invisible prison for another, falsely believing that a much stronger warden is somehow going to keep us safe from the monsters outside. Do not react to my presence. It is a suffocating command, built on absolute terrifying control. She forces her body to remain frozen as he parts this wealthy crowd like dark water. His approach is a terrifying inevitability. He moves with the heavy, inescapable pull of a midnight tide. When he finally reaches her, his hand slides to the small of her back, applying a microscopic, burning pressure. From any normal husband, this would be a sweet touch of romance. But from James, it is a searing, territorial brand on his property. He murmurs that she is carrying tension, his dark voice vibrating at a frequency only she can hear. Listen to me. When we surrender our autonomy out of fear, even a gentle touch becomes a heavy chain, reminding us exactly who holds the key to our cage. Listen up, because you and I are about to unpack some absolute peak drama. James is practically vibrating with quiet, brutal energy, his icy eyes sweeping the fancy room like he is hunting for prey. Before Emma can even spit out a warning, Ryan crashes the party, shattering the thick tension. Operating on straight-up unearned ego, this guy totally ignores the primal warning bells ringing in his head, feeling threatened by the boss-level aura James is putting out. Ryan actually steps right up, let's get his hand straight at jaws of a total beast. He introduces himself with this fake confidence, having zero clue he is demanding respect from a literal monster. Life has a seriously harsh way of checking our delusions. Never mistake your desperate cluelessness for a bulletproof vest. Picture the harsh gallery lights throwing these jagged, crazy shadows all over the marble floor. Ryan sticks his hand out. It is such a painfully basic move, and the guy is totally blind to the fact that he is offering a handshake to an apex predator. James Hawk does not even flinch. His dead eyes just track down to Ryan's shaking fingers, studying them the way a medical examiner looks at a grim piece of evidence. The silence in the room stretches out, heavy and suffocating, sounding exactly like a massive steel vault slamming shut forever. When Hawk finally opens his mouth, his voice is this flat, terrifying whisper, casually dropping that he already knows exactly who Ryan is. The outstretched arm just totally drops. True power never has to scream to make you feel completely helpless. Emma leaves her ex hanging out to dry, offering zero emotional backup. She stands there frozen, giving us a textbook example of a deep trauma response. She instinctively throws her support behind her captor, completely tossing out whatever connection she used to have with Ryan. Ryan stutters as the brutal truth wrecks his fragile ego, finally realizing that James is actually her husband. You can literally see the blood drain from his face as this fact hits him like a freight train. The panic in his wide eyes is pure agony to watch. He realizes the girl he spent 2 years pitying is now chained to a top-tier mob boss. James just stands there in his sharp charcoal suit, radiating pure menace. Never assume you understand the locked cages other people willingly choose to step into. Ryan is completely ripped apart. All his slick armor is totally gone, making this verbal beatdown an absolute train wreck to witness. James hits him with the most clinical dismissal ever, thanking the guy for his time, with the freezing cold vibe of a warden ending visiting hours. Turning to Emma, his gray eyes flash a silent question she does not even try to answer. He casually states they have somewhere to be. It is absolutely not a request. It is a straight-up command wrapped in fancy manners. They head for the side exit, her heels clicking a fast retreat. James drops his hand, leaving exactly 6 inches of freezing space peace between them. Sometimes, the most brutal prisons are built out of the invisible boundaries we let others set. Let us zero in on that physical gap. Just 6 deliberate inches of space, but it carries the weight of 7 brutal months of isolation. They walk like getting closer would trigger a lethal shock, typical for bonds held together by pure fear. Once they hit the dark hallway away from the nosy crowd, Emma speaks up. She calls him out for knowing the name of her ex before tonight. James does not blink. He hits her with this unblinking dead stare. A top-tier narcissist never breaks eye contact when dropping a cold fact or hiding a massive truth. Emma is totally haunted by that gaze, feeling the terrifying blur between honesty and total control. It is a rough lesson, but a predator's raw honesty will wreck you just as fast as their biggest lies. His comeback is a hollow echo, an empty flex of time with zero substance. Emma clenches her jaw in the dim light and fires back that his response is garbage. People trapped in these psychological cages learn fast how useless it is to ask questions when the awful truth is already carved into their bones. She puts the twisted puzzle together, realizing he rigged the guest list just to crash the event. A tiny expression flashes across his face, a rare slip of his iron grip that vanishes in a second. She talks about how Ryan looked at her with pathetic pity, treating her like trash on the curb. Here is a major reality check. Real isolation does not just hide you from the world. It completely warps how you see your own worth and reflection. She brings up the massive public humiliation, going off about how Ryan questioned her status, while the elite watched like circling vultures. She insists she had the mess handled before James decided to swoop in. Her voice totally shakes as she drops the dangerous question, searching his blank face for any clue. Why was he actually there? James Hawk has the chilling vibe of a guy who could order a hit while casually sipping his morning coffee. Over 7 agonizing months, Emma has built up the hyper-awareness of a literal hostage. She translates the dark gaps in his silence, reading his breathing just to stay alive. Now she uncovers a terrifying motive she is completely unprepared for. Sometimes the answers we chase are way more dangerous than the questions we ask. Stick with me, because this is the exact moment the psychological game flips on its head. He casually states he wanted to be there. No master plan, no manipulative build-up. Just a raw, unhinged admission handed over like a loaded gun. The simplicity of it hits her nervous system like a lightning strike. Emma freezes in the hallway, running through the cold contract she signed 7 months ago. That arrangement was supposed to be completely business and sterile. Now that fake reality is violently shattering. She suggests they get out of there, trying to keep a cool face while her racing pulse gives her away. He agrees with the exact same chilling calm. The most dangerous move a master manipulator can pull is giving you a sudden, real glimpse of what they actually want. As they head to the street, that 6-inch gap stays between them, acting like a charged electric fence. Emma stares straight at the glass doors. A crushing dread settles in her chest, making her realize she is absolutely boxed in. She is not trapped by Ryan and his pathetic attitude. She has way too much social armor for that. The real boss-level threat is the guy in the sharp suit walking right next to her. This man uses his own restraint as a weapon and drops a confession of dark desire like they are chatting about the weather. Back inside, Ryan is still frozen, choking on the fact that his whole idea of Emma has been destroyed. Holding on to an outdated version of someone will leave you totally wrecked when you finally see who they have become. Ryan is out here living in total ignorance of the brutal reality. He has zero clue what James Hawk actually does in the shadows, the massive criminal empire he runs, or why all those rich snobs bowed down the second he walked in. As the freezing night air hits Emma and they walk up to the blacked-out car, she accepts a dark truth. Complete ignorance is the only shield Ryan has left, and she prays he stays blind. Once inside the ride, the vibe gets incredibly heavy. This is not some relaxed silence between a normal couple. This is the suffocating vacuum of 2 people who spent 7 months dodging the massive, dangerous elephant in the room. Buried secrets and unspoken words will always weigh way heavier and cut way deeper than any physical chains ever could. They sit stiff on opposite sides of the leather seats, the gap mirroring their massive emotional walls. Streetlights bleed through the tinted glass, flashing across their faces. Nobody is saying a word. Then the driver, Marcus, completely shatters the agonizing tension. Enablers like him know exactly when a casual comment will blow up a fragile situation. He brings up the Callaway mess without checking the mirror. James shuts him down instantly, but the bomb has already gone off. That phrase hits Emma in the chest, burning like an infection. She repeats the sterile words, her tone totally dead. James turns his head just an inch, coldly confirming that Ryan is officially a situation. Ignoring a problem never makes it vanish. It just hands someone else the power to rewrite your reality. You and I have seen how pathological control disguises itself as protection. Emma spins around in the dim back seat to face him head-on. She knows the only way to crack a mastermind is to block every excuse he uses to dodge questions. She corners him. He knew about her ex before he stepped into that gallery. Her brain clicks into survival logic. She asks the heavy question, demanding to know if he has been having her followed. The 3 seconds of dead silence that fill the car are absolutely deafening. A hesitation from a ruthless calculator like Hawk is basically a signed confession. He slowly admits to having personnel keeping an eye on things, using this chilling corporate spin. True safety and peace of mind should never force you to hand over your basic freedom. Guys, picture this absolute nightmare scenario. Emma drops a chilling phrase, letting it hang in the suffocating air of the car. She tells him straight up it was an art gallery, where her ex-fiancé magically happened to be, invited by James's own shady contacts. The calculated manipulation here is mind-blowing. James, cold as ice, claims this is highly relevant information. Emma snaps, demanding to know who exactly finds it relevant. He just stares with those bottomless gray eyes and tells her it matters to him. Emma digs her shaking fingers into her knee, desperately trying to keep her nervous system from totally collapsing. She completely refuses to have this massive showdown in a moving vehicle. And the life lesson here is so real. Sometimes keeping your true dignity means you have to choose exactly when and where you actually fight your battles. The climax of this insane night hits like a sudden freeze. Emma absolutely demands they move this showdown inside the house. No more fake corporate jargon, she wants the raw truth right now. A dark shadow crosses his face, and the exhaustion of trying to decode this dangerous mob boss is totally breaking her. They pull up to his massive brownstone. Just imagine how she arrived here 7 months ago, gripping her luggage, and that contract like she was stepping into a bear trap. That feeling of being a complete intruder never faded for a second. The moment they step into the foyer, she drops her bag and spins around to face him before the front door even clicks shut. The lesson here is brutal. True, my friends. You can never truly build a safe, happy home when you are living inside a massive compromise. Let us break down this absolute madness piece by piece. Emma stands in the dim room, her voice shaking like crazy as she demands to know exactly how long he has been tracking her. James slides off his dark jacket, folding it with the terrifying grace of a wolf, setting up a trap. This guy literally rejects the word watching. The shadows catch his sharp jaw as he calls it being aware, twisting his toxic control into a twisted performance of devotion. His cold mask finally slips just a tiny bit. He confesses that 3 weeks ago, someone followed her from a coffee shop on 9th Avenue straight to their front door. It is a massive red flag, and it teaches us a brutal truth. True, deep betrayal almost always sneaks up on you wearing the comforting mask of absolute protection. Step with me right into the cold reality of her captivity, guys. This scene hinges on a seriously suffocating admission. James leans casually against his mahogany desk and flat out states the stalker returned yesterday. But his men totally erase the problem. Boom! All the breath instantly leaves Emma's lungs. Her posture goes completely rigid. When she forces out a desperate whisper demanding a name, his lips tighten just a fraction. He brushes it off like a casual business matter. Emma's voice totally cracks, fracturing under the heavy weight of her denial, finally breaking down. She spent months ignoring the toxic rot, and now it is all crashing down on her. The tragic truth of life is inescapable here. You can only ignore the monster sleeping in your house until you finally hear that heavy lock click shut. Look at Emma's trembling fingers pressing into that cold glass table. She is literally a drowning woman clinging to her last lifeboat, the strict boundaries of their original written contract. Her voice is shaking as she reminds this mob boss she never agreed to be managed. A dark shadow falls over the room as James takes one heavy step forward, giving off the terrifying stillness of a lion about to strike. Looking down with pure ice in his eyes, he completely destroys her fragile illusion. He brutally tells her that the exact second her pen signed that paper, her entire existence belonged to his dark underworld. He drops a calculated sigh and a totally fake apology. The bitter life lesson here is crystal clear. A true master of manipulation will always sacrifice a single pawn if it secures them absolute control over the entire chessboard. His terrifying voice echoes in the quiet room, claiming she deserved to know the full extent of his security. Those words hit her like freezing rain. She swallows hard, finally forcing the ultimate question out loud. She straight up asks if he is secretly managing anything else in the shadows. Guys, for one devastating fraction of a second, his dark eyes actually dart away. In the silent language of underworld deception, a cold boss like him only breaks eye contact when weaving a massive, beautiful lie. He softly promises there is absolutely nothing else, acting like he built these walls just to protect her from the wolves. He literally paints this violation of her freedom as some grand romantic sacrifice. Never forget this vital life lesson. A shiny golden cage is still a locked prison, and the man holding the key is always grooming you for total surrender. Just listen to the absolute suffocating silence in that room. It is only broken by the heavy ticking of a clock, sounding exactly like a countdown to total disaster. Emma's chin is quivering as she boldly demands the whole truth, fully knowing his answer will burn their fragile relationship to the ground. When James finally turns his cold gaze back to her, the fake husband veil completely drops. She finally sees the terrifying, ruthless underworld darkness she spent 7 months desperately trying to ignore. Her wild strategy for survival has totally twisted into this dark, tragic devotion. This crazy gravity pulls them together into an undeniably toxic romance she feels in her very bones. The most dangerous life lesson to learn here is about the human heart. It has a quiet willingness to fall madly in love with the exact person designing its ultimate destruction. James actually agrees to tell her everything, but this toxic king purposefully delays his words. It is that cruel suspense of holding the tension just 1 second too long to make her sweat. Suddenly, the sharp buzz of his phone shatters the quiet. Boom! We watch his entire vibe transform in a flash. The gentle posture of a caring husband totally vanishes, replaced instantly by the cold, granite stillness of a ruthless crime boss. His eyes completely flatline as he murmurs he has to take the call. Emma whispers for him to go, her voice full of tragic contradiction. She desperately wants him to stay, but hates herself for craving it. He retreats into the dark shadows of his study, and that heavy door clicks shut. Remember this harsh life lesson, guys. Carefully crafted fake masks will always fall away the second our true, darkest nature demands our total attention. Right through that heavy door, his muffled voice drifts out, asking about hit timing, and dropping a name that absolutely reeks of violent consequences. She was never meant to hear the bloody script of his double life. Standing there completely alone, Emma violently presses the heels of her hands against her closed eyes. She desperately needs that physical pressure to stop her mind from totally spiraling. The crushing realization hits her. She is nothing but a tiny pawn on his massive, invisible Mafia chessboard. We watch her haunting, slow walk to the kitchen. The loud hiss of boiling water becomes her only tiny comfort as she makes tea, trying to stitch her completely shattered reality back together. It highlights such a vital life lesson. When tossed into a terrifying ocean of pure chaos, our fragile minds will always try to build a desperate raft out of comforting, normal routines. Let us rewind the tape for a second and look at the real architect of all this misery. Enter Daniel, her absolute snake of an older brother. He rolls in with this slick, super hollow charm. This guy literally has the terrifying ability to drop life-ruining news like he is just chatting about the weather. It is the exact same dead-eyed stare he used as a kid to say their dad collapsed. 18 months ago, Daniel used that flat tone to confess to a massive mountain of underground debt. The violent mobsters holding his markers did not want his worthless life at all. They explicitly demanded Emma as human collateral. The tragedy of family is such a bitter pill to swallow. The life lesson here is chilling, guys. The real monsters that destroy our peace are rarely strangers in an alley. They are usually invited right through the front door by our own toxic blood. Collateral! That word hangs in the air like a total death sentence. Imagine Emma sitting completely paralyzed on her office floor, watching city life just blur past her window. Her entire rebuilt life turns to ash. As Daniel coldly explains, she has to marry a literal monster just to survive. The target? The notorious James Hawk. In the underworld, just dropping his name brings the dead quiet of a graveyard. He is an apex predator wrapped in custom Italian silk, running a massive dark syndicate while smiling for the cameras. He hides his terrifying, ruthless nature behind a shiny hospital wing bearing his name. It is the ultimate camouflage. The life lesson here is dark but real. The most dangerous men never hide in dark alleys. They hide their supreme cruelty right out in the open, perfectly shielded by extreme wealth and fake public charity. Stick with me, guys, because this is exactly where the whole story completely shifts. We see the wild, two-faced life of James Hawk. One second, he flashes a blinding smile at a charity gala, and the next, there are rumors of blood on the floor. Emma is pacing around like a trapped doe, fiercely demanding to know why a literal god among thieves would ever need to marry her. Her snake brother just brushes it off as some simple favor. For 3 agonizing days, her raw survival instinct completely overrides her terror. She drafts up a desperate containment protocol, a rigid, ironclad legal contract. She marches right into his glass office, looking like a frozen warrior, demanding strict financial boundaries. But here is the deeply tragic life lesson. You can never build a safe fortress out of flimsy paper to negotiate terms with the exact earthquake that pours a Balvary that is already swallowing your entire world. Picture this. Guys, the scene kicks off in this brutally cold conference room, and our girl Emma is literally sitting across from the devil himself. She slides her contract across the polished wood, desperate to prove she still owns her soul. But the camera locks onto James, and the dude does not even flinch. He just sits there radiating this terrifying control, totally ignoring her exit clause because he knows she is never getting out. Then he strikes, tapping his pen on the one boundary she set up to protect her sanity. The tragic irony is suffocating, man. Emma actually thinks she is building a safe fortress. But here is the hard truth of life. The walls we build to keep the bad guys out are usually the same ones that trap us inside. James just watches, quietly amused, knowing she is building her own prison. James just tilts his head, studying her with this crazy, unsettling curiosity, like a guy watching a moth slam into a window pane. He is straight up dissecting her trauma in real time. Emma tries to act tough, demanding this fragile illusion of a normal life. She just wants to be a ghost in his massive house, cut off from the dirty money keeping her alive. The silence stretches out, becoming totally suffocating, before his deep voice shatters the quiet. He drops a bomb, telling her that ignorance is never an actual shield. It is just the biggest lie we feed ourselves to feel safe at night. And honestly, there is a massive lesson here for all of us. True safety in a brutal world never comes from squeezing your eyes shut and hoping the monster leaves. It only happens when you finally find the guts to stare straight into the teeth of the predator. The cold realization hits hard as the scene lingers. His words were never meant to comfort her, guys. They were a measured warning. The heavy oak door groans, casting a jagged shadow as James steps into the room. His jaw is locked tight, wearing a mask of quiet, impending violence. Catching the shift in her shoulders, he announces he is leaving. When Emma demands real answers about the stalker, the dude just freezes. In that agonizing silence, he calculates exactly how much truth she can actually handle, asking her what danger really means. Under the harsh lamp, the cracks in his armor finally show. We all wear armor, but the heaviest burden in life is pretending we are never tired. The sheer effort of running, a crumbling empire is dragging him under. The heavy toll of playing the apex predator is literally carved into the weary slope of his shoulders. He softly claims the situation is handled, but Emma refuses to back down, demanding to know when he will return. As her cup clicks against the wood, a massive, tragic shift happens. She is completely done waiting for a rescue. She wants full integration into his crazy reality, begging for the truth about the man she married. James stands there like a statue. He warns her straight up that she will despise the answers. When she tells him to speak anyway, his immaculate facade completely shatters, and a terrifying vulnerability bleeds through. There is a wild lesson here, honestly. The most dangerous moment in any tragedy is never when you are pushed, but when you willingly step right into the dark. Let us step into this scene together, you and I, and watch how a toxic trauma bond builds its tragic architecture. James flashes a quick look of defeat before turning his back. The heavy door seals shut with a massive thud, leaving Emma totally frozen in the dim kitchen. Just look at how unnervingly still she is. The pure terror of this house used to eat her alive, but survival is a seriously ruthless teacher, and she has burned away all her soft spots. It brings up a heartbreaking truth about human nature, honestly. Sometimes, you literally have to destroy your own softness just to survive the monster in the room. Fear requires a fragile heart, and she has turned hers into solid stone. Now, the camera pushes in on her memory, flashing back to a threat from 3 weeks ago, and the icy dead stare of his top enforcer, Marcus. Emma is standing there totally paralyzed, suffocating under this fabricated life. Her mind runs the same agonizing reel on repeat. She remembers the blinding lights of the gallery, and the deafening silence right after James proudly claimed her as his property. She is clinging to 5 tiny words he whispered in a dark hallway, surviving on absolute crumbs of affection, designed to keep her chained. Suddenly, a harsh vibration shatters the quiet. Her phone lights up, throwing a ghostly glow over her shaking fingers. Unknown caller. She knows every number James uses. Her brain is screaming to walk away. But the hard truth of life is that we often chase familiar pain instead of embracing unknown freedom. The trauma bond is just too strong. With a shaking thumb, she answers. A super creepy voice slithers right through the speaker, completely empty of any warmth. This guy speaks with the calculated rhythm of a seasoned predator. You can see Emma's pulse hammering in her throat, her knuckles turning bone white as she demands to know who he is. The dude smoothly paints himself as an old buddy of her husband, his tone dripping with an arrogant ease. He whispers that she is blind to the absolute monster she married. When she tries to push back, his counterattack is brutal. He casually name-drops her brother Daniel, framing him as a broken pawn. It is a harsh reminder, guys, that the most dangerous enemies in life are usually the ones who speak to us politely. She sets her tea down to hide her shaking hands, firmly ordering him to never call again. The stranger keeps up this sickeningly polite warmth, even though it is completely fake. He softly tells her to weigh his poisonous words against the beautiful lies her husband feeds her. Then, click, the line goes dead. Emma is standing there frozen. Stick with me here, because you and I both know that the absolute hardest lesson we ever learn in life is that control is strictly an illusion. Her illusion has turned to dust. With panic rising, she calls her brother 3 times in a row. Finally, Daniel answers with a stiff, breathless greeting. It is the tragic, haunting sound of a broken man staring at his phone in pure dread. Emma skips the small talk completely. Her voice cuts like shattered glass as she demands the name of the guy who just ruined her peace. Emma tells him the mysterious caller knows everything about his forced obedience. She locks her voice into a flat, dead monotone. Listen, sometimes in life, going completely numb is the only possible way to survive unbearable pain. She demands a name. Through the speaker, she hears Daniel let out a jagged, weeping exhale. It is the harrowing sound of a hunted animal realizing it has nowhere left to run. Barely whispering, he drops the name Victor Crane, the exact architect of his ruin. Emma squeezes her eyes shut, pulling the darkness in to process the insane betrayal. Daniel starts babbling, trying to explain how his massive debt shifted hands. But Emma cuts right through the noise. She drives the knife straight to the heart of the tragedy, demanding to know if James knew about this. A heavy, terrified silence is her only answer. Her iron defenses crack, a tremor shaking her voice as she begs for the truth. Daniel weeps, confessing that James actually bought the debt 2 years ago. Bro, long before the wedding bells rang, her husband stole the advantage right from Crane, kicking off a vicious war over who literally owned her family. Emma feels her spirit detach from her body. The camera tilts down to her bare feet on the freezing tiles. She has zero memory of taking her shoes off, a haunting symptom of a fracturing mind. Listen, betrayal from the people we love breaks our reality worse than an enemy ever could. Standing in the dark shadows, she whispers the timeline out loud. She pulls on the cold logic of her past lawyer life, weaving the threads of manipulation together. She is officially trapped, dissecting her shiny cage from the inside out. She whispers this tragic timeline to the empty room. 6 months after James bought her brother, he slipped a ring on her finger, hiding the chains that bound them. You and I are going to unpack this together, because the manipulation is insane. She presses her hand against the counter, anchoring her mind, and demands to know what Crane wants. Daniel's voice withers into a whimper, admitting Crane wants psychological control. Emma feels a bitter wave of disgust at her brother's cowardice. Crane grazing inside a fabricated dream. The painful lesson here is that the truth can easily be forged into a devastating weapon. His master plan is to shatter her delusions, hand her the painful truth, and literally mold her into a weapon against her own husband. She lets out a hollow laugh, holding zero joy, wondering if this rival boss forgot who she used to be, a totally ruthless attorney. Look, guys, true power never actually dies. It just sleeps in the dark. Straightening her spine, the camera tracks her as she reclaims her strength. Notice how she rebuilds her autonomy by laying down brutal rules. She commands Daniel to cut all contact with Crane. When he chokes on tears to warn her, her voice turns to absolute ice, assuring him she understands the violence heading their way. She hangs up and stands still as a marble statue. The lighting drops. For exactly 30 agonizing seconds, she lets the tears fall, violently mourning the fake love. She proves that true resilience in life is simply giving yourself a strict time limit to grieve. Picture this. For 30 seconds straight, Emma is totally spiraling. Her entire life just collapsed, letting the heartbreak completely wreck her. The camera zooms in on her shaking shoulders as she mourns this beautifully toxic lie. But then, the tears just stop. Her face locks into an ice-cold mask of absolute tragedy. She dials her captor, but it goes to voicemail. Without missing a beat, she hits the doomsday emergency code. The line clicks, but Marcus, the soulless hitman, answers. He tries to pacify her with cheap excuses, but Emma is not having it. Listen, sometimes the only way to survive the absolute devil is to stop playing his twisted little games. With terrifying, surgical precision, she orders him to tell his boss that the infamous Victor Crane just crossed the sacred line, right into her own house. Emma did not just give Marcus a basic order, she literally flipped the entire chessboard. By setting a brutal deadline of 2 a.m, she proved she knew exactly who owned her brother's soul. She backed the monster into a corner, forcing Marcus to swallow his massive ego. Dropping the phone, she sat in the pitch-black room, decoding Victor Crane's twisted psychology. Crane totally knew she was the ultimate weapon to use against her own husband. Tracing the timeline backwards, she uncovered the bloody debt that infected her marriage from day one. Suddenly, a memory hits her, a lavish dinner from their early dating phase. It was a stunning masquerade completely built on gaslighting and lies. The harsh truth is, the most dangerous traps in life are always the ones beautifully disguised as grand romance. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? The camera pushes in on that dimly lit, incredibly tense dining room. Emma grilled him on why he picked her, knowing full well other women offered way better strategic advantages. But you and I both know a top-tier predator never picks their prey by accident. James just sat there, slicing his steak with the terrifying grace of a guy who uses time as a literal weapon. Looking up, he brought up her obsession with their first contract. While others blindly signed their souls away, she fought back with lawyers and demanded terms. He stopped moving, letting a suffocating silence drop. The lesson here is deeply human. People do not choose partners by pure chance. They hunt for the exact mirror of their own unresolved inner wars. Emma, she swallowed pure terror and turned it into cold, hardcore defiance. Back then, she lacked the vocabulary to understand his twisted obsession, so she buried the red flags. But tonight, that mental wall is completely destroyed. The clock flashed 40 minutes past midnight as the perimeter alarm chirped. James drifted into the kitchen like a ghost, stopping dead at the sight of her. She stood barefoot on the freezing tiles, gripping her phone like a loaded gun. Her jaw was locked tight, with a dangerous fury she was always told to suppress. Life often teaches us that fear can either crush us into dust or forge us into absolute steel. Tonight, Emma was purely sharpened steel. The air grew suffocatingly thin as the interrogation began. She ordered him to sit, and wildly enough, the untouchable boss obeyed. His dark eyes locked onto her trembling frame, and that icy armor seemed to melt. Emma realized he spent the entire drive home plotting exactly how to gaslight her wrath into submission. Stick with me here, because this is where their entire dynamic fractures forever. She dropped the name Victor Crane like a grenade onto the marble counter. James barely flinched, offering a single, calculated nod. She traced his sick lies, proving he manipulated her way before the wedding bells rang. The proud king leaned forward, faking vulnerability. It proves a simple truth in life. No matter how deeply you bury a lie, the dirt always washes away. James tried to spin his deception as pure protection, whispering that Crane would have weaponized her brother against her. He justified his cruelty by acting like he was the only one allowed to use such brutal methods. It was pure arrogance, a guy who fully believed he had the right to play God with her fate. Emma remained frozen. Her chest rose and fell in ragged breaths as the massive scale of his betrayal finally hit her. "You made a choice for me," she whispered, digging her pale fingernails into the hard oak table. She saw completely through his carefully constructed mask. He had decided he knew what was best, totally stripping away her free will. Always remember this simple truth. Control dressed up as love is never actually love. It is just a beautifully decorated, incredibly lonely cage. She stared him down, exposing the rotting foundation of their 7-month marriage. It was a relentless string of shady choices he made in the dark. "Do you see why this is wrong? Even if you meant well," she demanded, her voice cracking. James nodded instantly, offering the smooth, practiced surrender of a guy faking a soul. "Then explain this to me," she pushed back. "Who is Victor Crane? Tell me the actual truth, not the fake corporate spin." Outside, passing headlights sliced through the blinds, painting pale prison bars across his face. He confessed that Crane ruled the eastern streets when James was 23. James used the guy's power to build his own empire, then brutally cut him loose. It teaches a very harsh life lesson. Ambition without loyalty always leaves a trail of blood. You and I have seen this exact kind of dark obsession before. It is the absolute refusal to let go of what you consider yours. James described their bloody fallout with dead eyes, casually listing the men and money Crane lost. For 15 years, Crane waited in the shadows, desperate to snatch back his stolen crown. Her brother's debt was just the spark to light the powder keg. If James had not trapped Emma first, Crane absolutely would have. Emma sank back into her chair, staring blankly at her trembling hands. Her mind twisted, trying to survive the sheer horror by imagining an even darker timeline where Crane owned her instead. This is the tragic way the human mind protects itself. We accept an unbearable present by convincing ourselves the alternative was fatal. Watch closely as she tries to claw back some scrap of power. Emma realized Crane only reached out because she was blind to her husband's true nature. He wanted the ugly truth to terrify her into switching teams. "Is there anything in your past that would make me want to run to him?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft. A flicker of genuine wish crossed James's face. "It is incredibly rare to catch the devil off guard. Honestly, I am not sure," he murmured, his gaze dropping. "Tell me everything," she ordered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Give me the hard facts, and let me judge for myself." It breaks the heart to watch this unfold. The illusion of having a choice is always the human soul's final, desperate defense against total despair. He did not give her a dramatic, tearful confession. Pouring out his dark sins at 1 a.m. would have broken her completely. Instead, he coldly mapped out the rotten architecture of his underworld empire. It was not a flashy cartel, but a quiet, bleeding infection hidden behind legitimate corporate walls. He spoke with the hollow, terrifying calmness of a guy who stopped pretending to have a conscience years ago. He claimed his violence was just a brutal tool required to keep a messy world in line. It teaches us a very haunting truth about humanity. Monsters never look in the mirror and see a monster. They only see a misunderstood savior building a better order. Without missing a beat, he quietly named 3 innocent people who were completely destroyed just for standing in his way. He listed the months he spent cleaning up their own bloody messes, speaking like a bored accountant, reviewing a spreadsheet. He calmly pointed out 1 old mistake he wished he could erase, and 2 recent, terrible choices he would happily make all over again. Notice what is entirely missing from this picture. He never once said he was sorry. Emma caught that red flag instantly. He laid out his sins with perfect clarity, proving he thought about the damage he had done. Yet, he refused to offer the one thing a human heart truly craves: genuine remorse. He did not apologize, because a fractured mind like his simply cannot process guilt. The lesson here is vital. When someone shows you the cold, unfeeling machinery of their soul, you absolutely must believe them the first time. A suffocating quiet filled the kitchen as Emma let the horrifying weight of his true life wash over her. She was quietly testing if her own heart could survive the cold radiating off him. She asked about the shadow stalking her weeks ago, and James straight up admitted his guy took care of it. "Just a friendly chat," he murmured, his voice dead of any real emotion. He promised the stalker moved away by choice, but Emma picked up on his terrifyingly narrow definition of unharmed. "The guy is breathing and has his limbs," James whispered, utterly unapologetic for the implied brutality. A faint, tragic smile touched Emma's lips. "The saddest life lesson is this. The greatest danger of living in the dark is learning to find comfort right there, in the monster's teeth. Look at this absolute insanity. Crane is losing his mind over pure greed, demanding a massive fortune after their split. But James, the guy, acts like he is just checking the weather, literally laughing in the face of this mob boss. The silence in that room drops to absolute zero. Terrifying stuff. Emma is sitting there, hands shaking, totally zoning out just to survive the sheer shock of it all. Instead of having a total meltdown over being hunted by a kingpin, she flips the switch. She puts on that hardcore lawyer armor she spent 10 years building, boxing up her fear like she is reading someone else's lawsuit. It just goes to show you that when the drama hits way too hard, sometimes the only way to survive is to turn your brain into a freezing fortress and completely lock the pain out. You and I have absolutely seen this kind of mafia trap before, and Emma spots it a mile away. Crane is going to send another hitman thinking the wife is some easy target. Big mistake. She whispers that he does not know her at all, her voice like broken glass. James gives her this dark, twisted smile, totally eating up her boss energy. She looks him dead in the eyes and snaps that she refuses to be a pawn in this crazy game. If her life is the ultimate wager, she wants the raw truth right now. James nods, playing the perfect husband. But listen up, because here is the ultimate life lesson in all this chaos. A warden is never going to hand over the keys just because you asked nicely. If you really want your freedom, you have to rip it right out of their hands. She is shaking but demands to hear him say it out loud. James stares right into her soul and swears he is done pulling the strings. To normal folks, a promise from a ruthless mafia kingpin is basically worthless, but Emma has been trapped in his toxic grasp for 7 whole months, twisting her own morals just to survive this nightmare. She actually believes him, mostly because the devil almost never bothers to make real promises. Trusting the villain is sometimes the only way you can catch a breath. She slowly gets up, takes her glass to the sink, and turns her back. Right there, the crushing reality of her vendetta life completely drops on her. It hits us with a seriously brutal life lesson. The absolute worst part about being locked inside a gorgeous cage is that, sooner or later, you end up helping the jailer lock the door. Let us break down this crazy thing together, guys. She turns back around in the dark, and his untouchable boss mask is completely shattered. All that is left is this exhausted guy who just cannot keep up the mafia act anymore. He whispers that there are things the contract never accounted for. Her breath totally hitches. Her heart is hammering in the silence. She asks him what he means, and he just points at the wild, unspoken tension right between them. We are talking about 2 people completely off the script, absolutely terrified of the real feelings, growing in the middle of all their lies. It leaves us with a pretty massive life lesson to think about. Real, honest connection usually sparks at the exact second all those walls we spent years building finally come crashing down. The scene totally flips to her freezing, isolated room. She tells him they need to handle Crane first, basically hiding behind the safety of mob tactics instead of dealing with her feelings. James agrees, pushing their massive emotional baggage off for another day. Left all alone, she is staring at the ceiling, trying to justify this crazy hostage situation. But boom, the plot twists. Her phone buzzes in the pitch black. One single glowing text changes everything. It says her husband is not the biggest threat and tells her to ask about Catherine. Whoa. Whoever sent this knows exactly how to completely wreck their fragile trust. It is a brutal life lesson for all of us. The absolute worst, most fatal hits in life always come from the people who know exactly where our armor is broken. The camera zooms right in on her face, glowing in the blue light of that text. Catherine. This name is a total ghost, never mentioned once in 7 months of crazy secrets and mafia plotting. She flips the phone over. The silence in that giant house suddenly feels like it is suffocating her. A weak character would have run down the hall crying and losing their mind. But Emma, she does not shed a single tear, and she is definitely not going to sleep. With this massive secret burning a hole in her brain and a lethal boss sleeping 30 feet away, she starts silently setting up her own trap. The life lesson here is top tier. When the universe is actively trying to destroy you, sometimes you just have to become way colder and way sharper than the monsters lurking in your blind spot. Stick with me here, because we are watching this drama play out, step by step. Picture this kitchen at dawn. It is looking super bleak, and Emma is just sitting there holding a freezing cup of coffee. She has been camping out since 5. When James walks in at 6:15, the guy literally freezes. He locks up the second he spots that absolutely ruthless boss energy she is giving off. He tells her she did not sleep, sounding completely wrecked. She just fires back that he did not either. His messed up collar and huge eye bags prove he was having his own nightmare. The life lesson hitting us right now is too real. Keeping massive secrets does not just ruin the person you are lying to. It completely rots the soul of the person, fighting desperately to keep them hidden. The room drops into dead silence when she slides the phone across the table. You can hear the glass scraping. Emma goes full tactical mode, hunting for every reaction on his face. She catches his jaw locking up, and his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. She asks who sent it, sounding like a total ice queen. He just sinks into his chair and says he does not know. But she instantly snaps back that he knows the name, gripping her mug until her knuckles turn white. She demands the truth about Catherine. His silence right there is not a lie. It is just a shattered man staring into his dark past. It reminds us of a hard truth. Real connection never comes from being perfect. It comes from having the guts to drop your ugliest sins right on the table. Time absolutely drags in that kitchen. Emma is weaponizing the silence, pressing down just enough to totally break him. "Catherine Reeves," he whispers, and the name drops like an anvil. He admits they were together 6 years ago, way before he ditched the Mafia syndicate. Emma does not even blink. Her face is a stone wall. He looks at her with this haunting sadness and drops the plot twist. Catherine betrayed him. She snitched to a federal task force, and 3 of his top guys got locked up. Emma takes that massive hit without flinching. Catherine was an informant who cracked under the pressure. It really hits home with a brutal lesson. Human loyalty is incredibly fragile. When absolute ruin is on the line, even the most intense romance will shatter into pure self-preservation. He confesses that he understands why she completely cracked. He talks about the insane reality of witness relocation, swearing Catherine has been deleted from his life for 6 years. "As far as you knew," Emma fires back, shoving him to the edge. The tension is insane as she drops the ultimate question. Does Victor Crane know about Catherine? Hearing the boss's name, James literally flinches. It is a crazy reaction, showing how deep that mob trauma goes. But the craziest part? The digital footprint of that text does not even match Crane's network. We have a totally unknown third player hiding in the dark. It just goes to show you a scary truth. Escaping your past is a total joke. Your history is always waiting right there in the shadows, ready to collect every single debt. Emma nails it, saying the real question is if this ghost is working for Crane, fighting him, or hunting James for revenge. You can see a split-second look of pure awe on his face. He is relieved to finally have someone on his level. He is mind-blown that she mapped out this entire mafia nightmare overnight. She just replies coldly that she had time and fell back on her old conditioning. He gives this tiny, heartbroken smile before it totally vanishes. It is absolute cinematic gold in the middle of all this drama. Dragged back to reality, James finally drops the darkest piece of lore. That federal task force was run by an agent named Darren Cole. The lesson here is massive. Brain power is an amazing shield, but even the absolute smartest people can get wrecked by ghosts they never saw coming. Stick with me right here, because you and I are about to watch this whole thing explode. Cole actually quit the feds 3 years ago. The insane truth drops before James even finishes his sentence. Agent Cole is now on Victor Crane's payroll. Crane's ego was so destroyed that he literally bought the one guy who knows James's entire mob history. Cole has all the files, the buried sins, and every weakness. The camera zooms in on Emma as she processes this nightmare. She stays chillingly calm and realizes Crane is not just trying to rob them. He is building a massive legal coffin to bury them alive. We are learning a super dark truth here. Your worst enemies are never the ones screaming in your face. They are the ones silently studying your blueprints to completely destroy you. Let's unpack this together, you and I. Emma is absolutely losing her mind right now. She lays out the ultimate nightmare. If Catherine is back, she is the federal government's golden goose, walking proof ready to nuke James's operation from orbit. James just sits there looking completely cooked. Emma snaps at him, demanding to know who is pulling the strings. But James drops a massive plot twist. He says Catherine is doing this herself, either to drop a warning or totally wreck their crew. Here is a simple lesson. You never find out who your real day one friends are when the sun is shining. True loyalty is only ever forged in the absolute pitch black, right when everything around you is falling to pieces. James stares at Emma like she is the tragic main character in a mob movie. He drops the facts. Catherine is a pure survivor, never making a move unless it benefits her. Emma swallows that massive reality check and immediately says, "So what do we do next?" The second she drops the word "we," James totally cracks. He realizes she is chaining herself to his sinking ship. He tries to play the tough guy, telling her to bail out and save herself from his mess. But Emma is built totally different. She completely rejects his protection with absolute steel in her eyes. It leaves us with a real lesson today. Actual love is not just holding hands. It means refusing to let someone walk into their personal hell all by themselves. Emma completely shuts down his lone wolf act. She reminds him that they logged Lockslor's partnership 6 hours ago, and since the enemy dragged her into this, she is in it for good. She tells him straight up, "We are doing this together, or I am doing it solo." The tension is insane. 4 agonizing seconds pass before James finally folds and says, "Together." Then Emma goes absolute beast mode. For 4 straight hours, she turns into a human supercomputer, ripping through federal records and hacking Crane's empire to build the ultimate payback trap. The lesson here is pretty obvious. When your entire life feels like it is completely falling apart, the smartest thing you can do is fall back on the raw skills you actually know how to control. By the time they get their connection back, Emma has cooked up a profile on Victor Crane that is so deep it is terrifying. The mafia boss himself probably forgot half this stuff. James just stares at the screen, totally blown away by her massive brain. He cannot believe she pulled this off in just 4 hours. She just hits him with the coldest line, saying her old conditioning never fades. Then James points at the super shady shell company, buried in the files, a literal ghost machine for washing dirty mafia cash. He leans in, the hype building, and asks if they can actually use this as a weapon. Think about this life lesson for a second. In a life or death street fight, knowledge is not just power. It is a loaded gun. The vibe in the room completely flips right here. James drops the sad boy act and locks into pure, terrifying mafia boss mode. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emma knows the room is about to explode, so she tells him to just make the call. James takes a deep breath, totally burying his nerves, and dials the number. 2 rings. Catherine picks up, and her voice is just totally dead, like somebody who has been sleeping with one eye open for years. She coldly whispers that she was taking bets on how long this would take. It is a brutal reality check, giving us a grim lesson. When you spend your entire life surviving a literal nightmare, you usually end up losing the exact soul you were fighting to save. James tries to sound completely robotic, asking her why she dragged his wife into this massive mess. You can literally see his jaw shaking. Catherine fires back with absolute ice, saying she needed the data just to stay alive. It is total silence after that. See, Catherine has watched Victor Crane operate his sick revenge games for years. He uses stolen dirt to completely destroy people's lives. Catherine just flat out refused to be his next victim. Emma tries to read between the lines, looking for her real motive. Catherine drops a heavy truth bomb, saying James is not the actual villain of this story. Here is the lesson. The most brutally honest judgments about who is good and who is evil usually come from those in hell. Catherine finally admits she owes James a massive psychological debt, and her voice actually cracks for a second. Emma totally ignores the emotional drama and goes straight for the kill, asking what she actually wants. Catherine's answer hits like a freight train. She demands permanent extraction. After 6 years of rotting in fake federal witness protection, she wants her life back. She wants Victor Crane completely wiped off the map, so she is totally useless to the feds. She refuses to be a pawn anymore, claiming they can take him down together. James absolutely freezes at this master plan. It brings up a very real lesson for us. Just breathing every day is not living if you have to hand over the rights to your own soul. Watch this absolute masterclass in manipulation. Catherine does not even flinch as she demands blind trust from the exact same boss whose crew she threw in federal prison. She is basically offering Victor Crane's head on a silver platter, but the price is total obedience. James goes completely silent. He begs for 12 hours to set up the hit. She ruthlessly cuts it down to exactly 8. By tomorrow morning, this trap is going to snap shut, and any mistake will be totally fatal. James just puts the phone down and stares at his empty hands like he is out of options. Here is a brutal life lesson for you. Out on the streets, trust is never about being a good person. It is strictly a currency you only spend to survive. Emma is just sitting in the background, completely analyzing his meltdown like a hawk. She watches his brain working in overdrive, seeing the absolute agony of a boss, realizing his whole empire is on the line. She clocks that tiny jaw clench. She knows exactly what it means. He has already decided to pull the trigger. He takes the 8-hour deal because Catherine is the only weapon crazy enough to take down a monster like Crane. Emma looks right into his eyes without blinking and asks what he needs her to do. He looks up and drops a chilling warning. Once they open this door, there is absolutely no going back. The lesson here hits deep. Truly waking up to reality always demands the painful sacrifice of your innocence. Emma practically whispers that she already chose her side in this war. He tries to push back, saying she signed up to do the paperwork, not catch a bullet in the grand finale. But guys, watch how Emma completely snaps out of her victim era. For 2 whole years, she has been totally paralyzed by her past, using legal files as a bulletproof vest. Now, she looks him dead in the eye and says she is done hiding. She is walking straight into the explosion. Right next to him. You can literally see James's emotional walls come crashing down. This gives us a massive lesson to remember. You can never truly heal while you are hiding behind safe little barricades. Sooner or later, you have to step right back into the line of fire. James finally gives her a grim nod, and just like that, the room turns into an absolute war room. As it gets crazy late, Marcus and 2 lethal hitmen slide into the scene like literal ghosts. James starts bossing the crew around, while Emma turns into the ultimate cold-blooded hacker. Ripping through the files, she locks onto 3 very specific financial records. If they apply just the right amount of pressure, these boring pieces of paper will turn into a straight-up guillotine for Crane. Best part? Catherine will not even have to show her face. Here is the lesson about real influence. True power never yells for attention. It just works quietly in the dark, moving the pieces until the steel trap finally snaps shut. Stick with me here, because this is where the payback gets incredibly genius. Emma starts laying out the master plan. By making Catherine totally useless as a federal rat, they are completely starving Crane of his main target. Grabs 2 shirt. Crane will have absolutely no reason to hunt them down, all because Emma built a lethal death trap out of boring public files that were sitting in plain sight the whole time. James is totally stunned that she turned basic legal paperwork into a loaded weapon. Emma just smirks, already thinking about a corrupt from her past who owes her a massive favor. It teaches us a brilliant life lesson. Sometimes, the absolute most savage way to destroy a raging monster is just to make them completely irrelevant. Let's look at this insane opening together, you and I, because things are going nuclear. James points out that when the big boss Crane falls, he will know James was hiding a ruthless secret weapon the entire time. Emma does not even blink. The light catches her icy stare as she whispers that it is good for him to know. Out of nowhere, the silence shatters. For the first time in 7 months, James bursts out laughing. It is a raw sound that completely wrecks the dark tension in the room. He straight up admits she terrifies him, and she takes that as a massive compliment. Here is a simple lesson. There is nothing more powerful than showing your true to someone who sees your dark side and stays anyway. The psychological warfare here is just next level. James is moving pieces on the board with the cold precision of a guy who thrives in the darkest corners of the underworld. Emma matches his freak perfectly, completely sealing off any legal escape route. Fast forward a few hours, and boom, Victor Crane is locked up in federal chains. He is totally cooked. Then Marcus steps into the doorway. His voice is flat, but if you look closely, you can see this tiny softening around his eyes. It is the release of a violent tension he's been carrying for literal years. Honestly, the takeaway here is pretty grounded. We often drag the heavy weight of our survival around for so long that we completely forget what it actually feels like to finally set that massive burden down. James sits across from her, soaking in the sheer scale of their massive victory in total silence. Marcus chimes in from the shadows with the ultimate plot twist. Their inside man has flipped, running from the burning empire, and Catherine is entirely safe. The second the door clicks shut, Emma freezes like a statue. If you have ever been through absolute hell, you know this vibe. It is the moment the adrenaline that kept you alive just evaporates. The physical crash is insane, leaving an exhaustion you only get after walking through literal fire. But underneath all that, she is finally touching solid ground. The life lesson here is deep but real. The most absolute peace a person can find usually waits right on the ashes of their most terrifying nightmares. We are staying right here on James as he watches her breathe in the dark room. Emma whispers for him to speak, and this terrifying mafia boss quietly admits he has 0 words left. Guys, it is a staggering moment of pure vulnerability. He leans forward, and the tough guy mask is completely shattered. What is left is a bruised, authentic dude crawling out from the wreckage of his own armor. Emma shoots back that their strict contract has 0 clauses for this kind of intimacy. She stares out at the cold city, where she had to hide for so long. Here is the reality check for today. We can tell ourselves that safety can be perfectly engineered and planned out, but no contract on earth can protect a human heart from the absolute necessity of finally feeling something real. Stick with me here, because this is the exact second their whole universe flips. Emma turns from the window, looking like an absolute boss in the moonlight. She is completely done playing house. She demands an end to the fake distance and those hollow, scheduled dinners. Staring right into the eyes of this lethal enforcer, she straight up asks for the fire. James crosses the room and stops just 2 feet away, completely wrecking their carefully rehearsed safety protocols. His shoulders are rigid, and the tension is off the charts. The big lesson to remember today is that a life lived entirely on paper is just a dry run. If you ever want to feel something genuinely real, you have to be willing to strike a match and let the fake illusion of safety burn straight to the ground. The focus is all on James now, and you can totally feel the gravity of this crazy moment. He notes the massive shift in their dynamic with chilling precision. But Emma does not even flinch, casually reminding him she is a ruthless negotiator. Then, time basically stops. He raises his scarred hand and gently tucks a strand of hair behind her ear. That one touch absolutely nukes every single wall she ever built. He whispers her old name, but she cuts him off instantly. She demands he call her Hawk, claiming her tragic past as her own weapon. James just lets out a soft, aching laugh. It brings up a harsh truth we all have to face. The deepest kind of love cannot be drafted in a safe little contract. It only shows up when you finally drop your shield and let the terror in. The morning sun blasts through the blinds, and even though the big boss Crane is locked away, the aftermath is heavy. Emma is just staring at her phone. 3 missed calls from Ryan Calloway. The sheer audacity of this guy, entirely unable to realize he is totally irrelevant now, is wild. She does not shake, and she definitely does not cry. She just watches those notifications stack up, feeling absolutely nothing but cold space where her panic used to be. It is a massive flex, honestly. It leads to a very powerful revelation for anyone watching. True closure is not some dramatic explosion of anger or revenge. It happens the exact second you look directly at the ghost who used to haunt your nights, and you feel nothing at all. The past only has the power we choose to hand back to it. She hits play, letting the audio fill the room. That first voicemail is a pathetic attempt to sound casual. Boom, deleted instantly. The second one is dripping with fake concern, digging for dirt on James. Deleted again. But the third one? That is where the ugly mask completely falls off. Ryan's voice echoes with the frantic entitlement of a guy who refuses to accept he has been replaced. He tries to act tough, repeating those tired old lines about how she deserves more. Emma just stands there, unbothered, recognizing the sad flailing of a manipulator losing his grip. Listen closely, because this is a lesson written in stone. You owe absolutely nothing to the toxic shadows of your past. They only come knocking to see if the chains they put on you are still locked tight. The scene cuts hard to the ultimate power move. Emma blocks Ryan's number, permanently burning the bridge to her old life. Real survival means utterly cutting off anyone who only knew the weak version of you. She heads downstairs and stops dead in her tracks. James is leaning on the counter with 2 mugs of black coffee. You and I can clearly see the shift here. He is quietly claiming his space in her world. Emma rolls with it, taking the mug and casually dropping the bomb about Ryan's calls. James slowly turns, one eyebrow creeping up, and locks eyes with her in this terrifying, unblinking calm. The lesson is simple but heavy. Once you step into your true power, you have to let the people who truly respect your strength finally share your space. She shreds Ryan's pathetic strategy without blinking. She knows he saw the big boss go down and foolishly thought he could swoop in as the hero. Emma sips her coffee, totally accepting this silent partnership James is offering. When she tells him the number is permanently blocked, she is setting a brand new rule. From now on, it is absolute honesty between them. A tiny, dangerous smirk crosses James's face, showing he is genuinely impressed. But the romance is instantly killed by reality when Emma demands the battle plan. James leans in close, dropping his voice. The feds are moving on Crane, and the real bloodbath is just beginning. Look, here's the truth. A real partnership is not just about quiet moments. It is about standing back to back when the actual war starts. The tension inside this scene is thick enough to cut with a knife. James predicts the warrants will explode into a massive federal nightmare within 30 days. He leans against the counter, staring right at her, and flat out admits his own neck is on the chopping block. Emma does not even flinch. She spent the entire night mapping out this exact disaster. She just looks at him and asks how bad the bleeding is. He says it is manageable, but only if they have a totally ruthless lawyer. The silence that drops next is epic. She completely shatters their old fake identities by casually dropping her past as a high-stakes financial litigator onto the table. It proves a massive point about human nature. Shared survival always breeds the deepest, most unbreakable kind of intimacy. She grabs that fake title of wife and turns it into a loaded weapon, pointing it straight at his defenses. James tries to throw up some legal walls about spouse privilege, but Emma completely wrecks him in half a second. Her voice is dead calm, sounding exactly like a predator who finally feels at home in the dark. She is not asking to file his paperwork. She is demanding a permanent seat at the Mafia War Council. No more hiding in the background. James sets his coffee down, and the click echoes like a gunshot. He completely drops his tough guy act, giving her the raw respect and only gives his true equal. The lesson here is explosive. Guys, stepping into your true power means forcing the people you care about to see exactly how incredibly dangerous you really are. Let's unpack this absolute madness together. James does not even try to fight her on this. He just takes the L, nods, and tells her to get his top-tier lawyer on the line. Emma refuses to be sidelined again. They spend 90 grueling minutes with tearing through the files, and guess what? Emma was dead right. James is bleeding out from 2 massive financial traps. The only lifeline is the insane paper trail Emma built while everyone else slept. Enter Jillian Park, a legal shark with 0 chill. She listens to Emma entirely dismantle the trap, completely silent game, recognizing game. When Emma drops the name of her old cutthroat firm, Jillian's icy mask shatters into pure respect. Listen to me on this one. In a world full of snakes and fake tough guys, being absolutely undeniable at what you do is the only thing that keeps you breathing. Jillian wants to know where this mastermind came from. Emma credits her raw grit, then name drops the ruthless judge who taught her the courtroom's dark arts. You can literally hear Jillian choke on her breath over the phone. Emma casually roasts the judge for his massive ego, and our stoic boss James actually bites his lip to stop from laughing out loud. Jillian promises to handle the filings, mutters a rare thank you, and dips. The room goes dead. James whispers that his shark attorney has never thanked a single human being before. Emma sets her pen down, stares into his soul, and says he should have unleashed her from day one. He quietly reminds her she asked to stay blind to his business. She nods, fully accepting her terrifying new role. Remember this. You have to step up and own your unique power, because if you hide from your true potential, the sharks will eat you alive. Stick with me here, because the vibe entirely flips. James takes the hit in total silence. Bro, it is wild, watching a boss own his fatal mistake without making a single excuse. He mutters he will update his files, dropping a terrifying new normal over the office. It is crazy how shared trauma suddenly feels the ed's chill. Sunday morning. These two are literally sipping lukewarm coffee while plotting to destroy federal prosecutors. The human brain is unhinged. It will build a cozy campfire inside a burning house just to feel safe. But hours later, that illusion completely shatters. Emma is buried in paperwork when top enforcer Marcus fills the doorway. His posture is so stiff that Emma actually drops her pen. The real war has arrived. Never get too comfortable in the chaos, guys. A temporary moment of peace is usually just the quiet calm before an absolute bloodbath. Marcus steps into the room, sounding totally rattled. He drops the absolute bomb. Catherine Reeves has been found. Emma shoots up from her desk, her heart hammering. She instantly demands to know who breached their security, totally bracing for a full-on hit squad. But Marcus just raises a hand to chill her out. Catherine is not dodging assassins. She is literally waiting downstairs, and she specifically asked for Emma. The tension gets so thick you could cut it with a knife. Why does she want Emma? James is locked away in his office, completely clueless about this massive plot twist. Emma realizes she is about to go face to face with the living ghost of his dark past. This whole mess proves a really harsh truth, bro. You can run as fast as you want, but eventually, you have to stand your ground and fight the ghosts you spend your whole life trying to escape. Emma goes full boss mode with absolute authority. She orders Marcus to keep James completely in the dark so she can secure 10 uninterrupted minutes with this phantom. Marcus actually hesitates, looking totally terrified, before he finally nods. Emma marches down the long hallway, the silence heavily crushing her shoulders. She pushes open the heavy oak doors, and there is Catherine. She sits dead center in this huge room, looking impossibly tiny. Her spine is locked tight, eyes darting around like a cornered animal waiting for a sniper. There is zero mafia manipulation left in her, guys. She is just a completely broken soul who forgot how to breathe. It is super tragic-ness, and it leaves us with a brutal reality check. Living in constant fear does not build character. If you let that paranoia run wild, it will completely hollow you out from the inside. Step into the stark lighting of this room with me. We are watching Emma totally skip the polite introductions and instantly claim the space like an absolute boss. Catherine admits she ditched her mob handler to buy them exactly 40 minutes of privacy. When Emma coldly demands to know why, Catherine sounds shattered. She literally calls Emma the ultimate anomaly, the wild card that ruined all their calculations. She confesses her massive blunder. She thought Emma was just a soft civilian, some fragile pawn James kept hidden away. Instead, Emma obliterated a massive syndicate threat in a few hours, weaponizing financial records that veteran hitman totally ignored. Let this be a massive warning to everybody watching. Judging your competition by their quiet, calm exterior is the absolute fastest way to completely destroy your own empire. Catherine sounds entirely dead inside. She flat out states that Emma is no normal civilian, and Emma takes the compliment without even flinching. Under the table, Catherine is nervously folding her trembling hands. It is the frantic energy of a mastermind who has no idea how to be vulnerable. She admits she had to see the woman James picked after surviving 6 years of pure mafia hell. Staring at Emma with totally hollow eyes, Catherine whispers that he chose perfectly. The silence gets so heavy, it could literally crush your lungs. Emma quietly studies this broken woman, a living ghost who used to mean everything to James. It brings up a huge reality check for all of us. True mental toughness is not about dodging the damage entirely. It is all about how you pick yourself up and carry your shattered pieces afterward. In a wild twist, a massive wave of empathy washes over Emma. She realizes Catherine is not the villain anymore. She is just tragic collateral damage from a brutal gang war. With absolute boss energy, Emma offers her total absolution. She looks right at her and says she is completely free. Catherine's jaw clenches as her brain short-circuits, trying to process a pardon she thought was impossible. Then, the temperature in the room drops below 0. James materializes in the doorway. His dark eyes scan the room, and in 3 agonizing seconds, 6 years of bloody history crash over his face. But bro, he does not rage. He just silently buries that dead timeline right there. It proves that real peace only starts the second we stop wrestling with her demons. Emma softly calls his name, dropping the single anchor that pulls him back to reality. Emma completely owns the volatile energy in the room, calmly telling James they were just finishing up. Bro, the silent conversation flashing between their eyes is insane. With one look, she tells him she is handling his worst nightmare, and he actually accepts her dominance by leaning against the doorframe without making a sound. That is some top-tier trust. Slowly, Catherine stands up. She looks at James with the empty stare of someone who survived the war but lost her soul. She forces out a broken apology, knowing full well that words do not fix a bloody mafia ledger. James gives her absolutely nothing. He stays chillingly silent, staring right through her, like she is already a ghost. It hits you with a really tough pill to swallow. You do not always need to hand out your explicit forgiveness to finally start healing from a massive betrayal. You and I are going to look at this final exit together because it is wild. There is 0 grand forgiveness happening here, because in this underworld, forced apologies are basically emotional surrender. Instead, we get this incredibly raw moment of closure. They just nod at each other, 2 survivors recognizing the same trauma. Catherine quietly mutters that James is a notoriously difficult man. Emma instantly agrees without missing a beat. For a split second, Catherine's frozen face twitches into a super sad, tiny smile. She grabs her coat and completely ghosts into the hallway. The room instantly flatlines back into total heavy silence. Here is the brutal truth of the real world. Surviving a toxic situation almost never ends with a warm, teary hug. It usually just ends with the quiet click of a heavy door shutting, and the threat finally being gone. Now look at the insane shift in James. He softly tells Emma that he handled the situation, using the exact same cold-blooded phrasing he used months ago. But bro, his tone is completely different now. This is not some ruthless boss managing a chess piece anymore. His raspy voice gives away the pure shock of a lonely guy, realizing he just struck absolute gold. He asks her to step closer. She moves in, and he meets her exactly halfway in the middle of this dark room. That physical negotiation perfectly shows off their new power dynamic. They are total equals now. His hand is literally trembling as he reaches out and cups her face, desperately needing to ground himself. This is a legendary lesson right here. Even the most hardcore, titanium-plated emotional walls will turn to absolute dust when you finally experience real, authentic human connection. Listen to this twist, guys. We finally get to see James step into the light and voluntarily spill his secrets, which is huge for a boss. He admits the real reason he bought out her massive debt 2 years ago. He always claimed it was just standard asset protection. Total lie, bro. That was just a desperate cover story to hide his absolute obsession with her. He whispers that he was fully compromised way before she ever walked into that freezing negotiation room. Emma just stands there, totally stunned into silence. He remembers the thick contract she slammed on his desk that day. She did not show up crying for help. She came in like a savage lawyer, ready to litigate her own survival. Life hits hard, but always remember this. When the entire world is plotting to break you, the absolute best weapon you can carry is a fiercely educated, unyielding mind. Yo, lean in close, because the weight of this scene is completely insane. James realizes she walked into that room fully prepared to take the loss, but she was ready to deal massive psychological damage on the way down. Keeping dead eye contact, he drops a massive bombshell. This was never a business deal. His voice drops to a broken whisper, confessing she was his first taste of actual reality in 20 hollow years. Emma just steadies her breathing, choosing to tank this raw emotion head-on instead of hiding. James explains he built his ice-cold persona so no rival could weaponize his feelings. But here is the real lesson, guys. Shutting off your heart completely is literally impossible. Even the most ruthless boss eventually has to take a knee when real love enters the chat. The true brilliance of this moment is that we do not get some flashy fight scene. Instead, we witness Emma going full tactical genius. She is not smashing his walls. She simply exists with fierce authenticity, slowly melting his heavy armor until it falls apart. Watch how she physically chokes, back a sob, forcing her brain to override the trauma. Crying is for survival mode, and she refuses to waste tears here. She verbally torches their old rules, and James just solemnly nods. With stone-cold eyes, she dictates a new world order, demanding a real partnership and zero emotional distance. It is a massive flex, and the life lesson is clear. Real main character power is never about screaming the loudest. It is about having the quiet courage to finally grab the steering wheel of your own destiny. Emma instantly lays down the law, demanding intel on any new threats trying to mess with their peace. Then comes the ultimate power move. She swears that if he ever spies on her again, she will build a legal cage so flawless that top-tier mob lawyers will choke trying to open it. James takes the full hit of that menace energy. Out of nowhere, a totally genuine laugh rips out of his chest. His heavy paranoia armor literally shatters into pure joy. That warm sound hits Emma like the morning sun, after 7 months of living like a hunted ghost. She closes her eyes and finally leans into his touch. You and I need to lock this lesson in right now. The absolute best rewards and deepest connections in life are always waiting patiently on the other side of terrifying vulnerability. The story skips ahead a few weeks, giving us the gritty reality of their new life. Blending their legal and illegal worlds is a terrifying balancing act. But a massive shift happens. James goes into full boss mode, wiping out rival threats while keeping his cool, only giving Emma the rundown after the dust settles. When news drops that Ryan fled, Emma brushes it off like old spam mail. Later, Daniel rolls up for dinner. He walks in sweating bullets, radiating the nervous energy of a soldier trying to chill in a former war zone. The life lesson here hits hard. For anyone who has spent their entire life fighting in the trenches, dropping your weapons, and learning how to actually accept quiet peace is often the most terrifying plot twist you will ever face. James kicks things off by flaming Daniel for showing up late. These two do not exactly hug it out. It is a calculated mutual respect, finally ditching the toxic rivalry that used to ruin everything. Emma watches them argue over sports stats, realizing this is just bro language for blowing off steam without throwing punches. She takes in this crazy normal dinner, treating it like the rarest loot drop. A month later, an untraceable postcard from Catherine arrives. 4 simple words of thanks, proving a broken soul can actually step back into the light. Emma props it on her sunny windowsill. This is a massive life lesson for all of us. No matter how badly your life gets wrecked, by the plot, you can always rebuild your story from scratch. If you simply give yourself the proper space to breathe. We get a clean time skip moving forward 4 chill months. Emma stands in the afternoon sun, checking her steady hands. It is a grounding trick to remind herself she is finally the boss of her own life again after years of being a pawn. She feels James casually walk into the room. Back in the dark days, his shadow alone would have sent her into full defense mode. Now, the thud of his footsteps is just a comforting detail. He stands right next to her, their shoulders naturally bumping. The invisible wall of ice between them is completely deleted. This beautifully normal moment is what healing looks like when the survival radar finally turns off. Here is the real life lesson. Actual safety is not just the absence of bad guys. It is having that one person next to you who you never have to keep your guard up around. They pass a coffee mug back and forth without saying a word. No small talk needed. He leans in, the morning light hitting his tired face, and mutters that the nightmare is officially over. The final legal strikes against their enemy are locked in. By springtime, that villain will be completely erased. They share a heavy, knowing look. The street lamps cast long shadows across an apartment that used to feel like a war room. Now, it is simply their home. Outside, the city is absolute chaos, but inside, the vibe is completely bulletproof. You and I both know how rare it is to find a safe zone in a crazy world. They built an invisible shield out of shared silence, proving a massive life lesson. The ultimate victory is simply finding someone who lets you put your heavy weapons down. The shot locks onto Emma, showing she is fully in control of her mind now. When James quietly asks what she is thinking, you can literally see the flashbacks hit her eyes. She remembers the toxic elite circles, trying to blend into the background, and being the terrified girl running for her life. But the second she locks eyes with James, her posture totally relaxes. She finally unlocks the biggest truth. Building massive walls around your heart will definitely keep the monsters away, but it will also leave you starved in the dark. Taking the insane risk of letting someone actually see your damage is the only real way to live. She takes a deep breath, looks right at him, and drops the bombshell. She wants to hit that elite art gallery next week. No more lurking in the shadows. The hiding phase of her life is officially over. James asks why she would willingly walk straight back into enemy territory. Emma drops the mind games. She flat out tells him she wants to walk into a packed room on the arm of the guy she loves, purely to flex that they are together. The hard mob boss tension in his jaw instantly vaporizes. You see this rare, unguarded look hit his face. He gives her a nod. We cut straight to the gallery night, the exact spot where her enemies thought they destroyed her. Tonight, she is rocking a deep burgundy dress that absolutely commands the room. James is right by her side. This is not some fake publicity stunt. His touch is a silent promise, proving they just stepped into the boss room as an unshakable duo. The life lesson here is simple. True loyalty is standing by the people you love when the lights are blinding. Emma glides through the high society crowd, moving like absolute royalty without needing her old defenses. She is miles away from that terrified girl hugging the walls. The elites are whispering, using cold stares to figure out how she survived their brutal world. But their toxic energy just bounces off her. The fragile target they thought they broke is permanently deleted, leaving behind a queen who is totally untouchable. Look, you and I have probably wasted way too much time trying to be flawless before facing the world. But as the camera zooms in on her smirk, it drops the ultimate life lesson. Massive, unshakable power is never about having a perfect past or hiding your battle damage. It is about grabbing all the chaotic, broken pieces of your story and refusing to ever apologize to the haters again.
One of Emma S.'s strongest qualities is her ability to think clearly under pressure. When Victor Crane contacts her and uses Daniel S.'s name as leverage, Emma does not collapse. She asks questions, calls Daniel, identifies the structure of the threat, and demands the truth from James. Later, when Catherine S.'s name appears, Emma does not respond with jealousy alone. She analyzes the message, recognizes that there may be a third party involved, and begins building a strategy. This is an important educational lesson. Knowledge turns fear into power. Fear becomes overwhelming when we do not understand what is happening. But once we gather facts, organize information, and identify motives, fear becomes something we can work with. Emma's legal training matters, but the deeper lesson applies to everyone. When facing manipulation, debt, betrayal, workplace pressure, or family crisis, the first step is often to stop reacting emotionally long enough to understand the situation. Who benefits? What information is missed? What choices are available? Emma's strength is not that she feels no fear. It is that she refuses to let fear make her passive. She uses her skills, her intelligence, and her experience to become an active participant in solving the crisis. This is educationally powerful for viewers, especially those who have felt trapped by other people's decisions. Emma shows that being protected is not the same as being powerless. Once James gives her the truth, she does not become a burden.
She becomes essential.
The lesson is clear. People become stronger when they are trusted with information. Truth does not always make life easier, but it makes real courage possible.